All right, so with our handsome Mr. Bernie, you ready, sir? I wanted to work a little bit with going to our bed behavior, practice a bit with the stays, see how they're progressing. So we might go again, bed. Yes, what a good job. So if he's ever a little unsure, I do want to make sure I'm feeding for every potential beginning stage of the steps. So if, again, he wasn't as comfortable with the bedding, we build that back up for him, right? We'll try a little bit with our down. Yes, nice job. So, but if let's say there's ever something that he is finding challenging, remember that there could be moments where he's not performing well because he's nervous, not because he's trying to be obnoxious or not pay attention. If it's not nervousness, it could be another emotion. So, for example, he could be really excited. He could be a little bit distractible. So remember how adolescence, as we were discussing a little bit earlier, is a really hard part of your puppy's development. I feel that a lot of times people underestimate how easy puppyhood was 5 months and below compared to 6 months and above. I would also recommend, like, if there are certain tasks or behaviors that Mr. B is now not doing so well with, there is no harm in taking a pause and stopping what those skills might be until his development is a little bit more on par for that skill or that setup. So what I mean by that is, like, right now we're just working a gorgeous stay as I'm just blabbing for a few moments. But like, let's say, for example, with my boy who was a teenager for a little bit and now he is 3.5, is there were certain skills that at times, like with environments or distractions, he couldn't tolerate them, and he was starting to almost look reactive because he was getting so frustrated with the environment, the setup, and maybe some trigger stacking, where things were getting too challenging, and therefore he was not doing well in that setup. So it's perfectly okay to take a pause from something or some practice or some environment if your dog is not doing well with it. This concept of keeping it going and just getting them to get over it tends to actually create a dog that gets really good at that rehearsal, and behavior doesn't tend to get softer, it tends to get bigger. So we do want to make sure that if there are certain things that come springtime he starts to struggle with, you don't have to do the full lap of your neighborhood. If, let's say, all of a sudden now every single person, dog, and critter is out and about, it could be for some puppies too challenging during adolescence. This does not mean that we want to make his world so small that he's not going to be functional for later, or that his experiences or enrichment go out the window. But I know we've discussed a little bit with sniffspot.com, or going to a more open space where you can see things pass by, but with more space between you and them or that thing. And a lot of times space is a great way to build your dog's comfort range and understanding while still feeling under threshold, because they don't feel like they've been plopped into it intimately. So if, let's say, for example, he feels more comfortable seeing things pass by versus things approaching him and then walk by, a lot of dogs find the straight on approach to be really confrontational or flustering. So if, let's say, for example, we were out for a walk with him and here comes another barking, lunging dog because they too are struggling, your dog might respond to that by also then barking and lunging in the direction of that dog that's also having a challenging moment. So if, let's say, they were going face to face, that's kind of just setting them up to continuously keep going in that direction and escalate behavior. Where if maybe there's a space to move off to the side or do a find it in the bushes, or move where now you're going up, let's say a driveway, now you've completely avoided the face to face, and now this dog might be passing this way as you're going that way, so creating more of a T shape. So that for a lot of dogs can be very beneficial, especially if their skill set has slightly gone out the window because their comfort range or their adolescence has kind of taken over for right now. So I know for us, adolescence can be a challenging time frame as well. And things that we thought were going to be the way we felt all the time do eventually change, or you have different opinions down the road. So remember too that what we liked when we were 5 is not the same thing we liked when we were 10. It's not the same thing we liked when we were 20, and so forth. So if you're finding that your babe was immensely social, which again, Mr. B is doing great, but let's say you had a dog that was super duper social to the point where like everything and everyone they wanted to be intimate with, and then that is kind of how we raise them, you may find that that actually becomes problematic, because now later, maybe not everything or everyone wants to be intimate with that now dog. And now your dog could get frustrated and then start looking as if they're, again, reactive or overwhelmed and frustrated, and it could even turn to aggression. So this is where, if your babe was social, but then as they hit adolescence, it is normal for your dog to become dog selective or even people selective. For some breeds, they were bred to be selective into, for example, what they would seem was going to be comfortable versus potentially could be a threat. And so this is where, if you have, like, for example, a guardian breed and something novel comes onto the environment, like a UPS driver, your dog is more than likely going to indicate, but we don't want behavior to escalate. So, like, let's say, for example, a Great Pyrenees, which was bred to, keep a flock of sheep safe from predators. If, let's say, any sort of item, be it dog to person, came onto that property, they would more than likely become defensive and even guard the animals from those things. So a lot of times when we find there are behavioral problems, it tends to be genetically driven or lack of sort of exposure or negative exposures as well. So remember that 20 to 40% of your dog's behavior is going to stem from genetics. So that's where it's always important. I'm just going to see if we can rock this a little bit with a stay. I'm just going to do a little bit where I move a little bit, move something. We're just going to see if we can start to help him feel a little bit more cozy with adding some difficulty. So with these stays, since he's in a lovely little down position, I'm going and trying to feed him between his little front legs roughly, or on the cot. So that way I'm kind of reinforcing him for staying nice and low and relaxed on the bed. So you'll see that, like, when we're practicing even place behaviors, if the dog makes a mistake, he's not in trouble. So there's this concept of teaching your dog right and wrong. And remember that that's a human construct. So dogs either feel safe or unsafe. So while we're teaching them, are we a teacher that brings them comfort, understanding, maybe some empathy? Or are we a teacher that at times startles them or surprises them, or maybe, again, overwhelms them in the learning process? So I'm not saying this is what you guys are rocking, but I know sometimes I have different folks that are sometimes popping in and watching some of the content, and not everybody realizes that the dog industry is completely unregulated. So the problem with that setup is that anybody can say they're a dog trainer, and some have even swiped the behaviorist title, and that comes with veterinary school, and most have not done that aspect. So since the industry is sadly unregulated, there are a lot of inhumane options out there to stop behavior quickly, but normally at the extreme welfare of the dog. So we want to make sure that whatever we're using as practice or for equipment or for engaging with our dogs, is it going to be something that's going to help build the dog up and feel safe and confident and resilient? Or is it something that's going to break down the dog, make them less of who they are, but at the same time also make them more unpredictable, and at times actually add to that fear, anxiety, or potential aggression for down the road? So this is beautiful with this stay. So again, I'm just trying to make some distraction moments, wiggling things around. He's doing a really nice job. So let's say your puppy's doing a really great job. You're practicing loading the dishwasher or setting up the dinner table or sitting down to do an email or whatever. You're pretending to scrolling on your phone, and then you go and reinforce the puppy or toss a snack at them if you're an okay shot, to make it to the pup on their target zone. So if you've got a dog bed here and there, you can also, excuse me, I should not be drinking seltzer. You can also move around the dog bed to different parts of your home. And you may even want to practice this even outdoors. So getting your puppy to start generalized skills, which is, I know we discussed a little bit earlier, where you're like, oh, he does so well for you, here at the center and doing these skills, and he does such a great job paying attention. So remember, dogs tend to learn the concept of something, but almost like a picture. So his learning right now, it's in this environment with these funny sights and sounds, with the crazy snack lady, with this sort of setup or this dog caught. He may not also understand it if you take it out of context. So if let's say I did this exact same thing out there with the trucks and the sights and sounds, I probably would not be getting this type of response instantly, but could build up to it with exposure and practice. So at home, if we're finding that behaviors are not reliable, or he's not understanding concepts, or you're finding they're not generalizing well, it could be that we haven't started in each one of those venues from the beginning step and then build up. What we tend to do is we see the dog do amazing at something in the kitchen, and then we expect that exact same refinement and finesse now magically out in the field. And then that's where we set ourselves up for failure, because neither of you have actually rehearsed the thing in those settings. So remember, we want to practice these skills in many different venues to start building up that your dog could start to generalize the behavior and offer it in different situations with different variations of difficulty, distractions, distances, all that fun. So like right now, Mr. B is doing stellar. And again, I'm just feeding between his little front feet or on the dog bed mostly. So we're building up a lot of great value in being stuck. So here we go. We have a little moment where he broke. I probably was pushing it a little bit too much. Sometimes, ready, bed, we may find there's certain time frames or certain intervals, or however long your puppy could practice something could vary from day to day. But it could also be one of those situations where maybe in between he needs a little break. Ready, bed? Just like, what the heck? So I might even toss a little something on there just to help him out. Nice, ready? So we'll go back into our lovely down, and we're going to start again. So I'm not going to make it as challenging. So if I have moments, remember that this is communication. So he's saying, I either don't get it, or I'm feeling overwhelmed, or I was getting too tired or bored. So from his perspective, again, not doing well or sort of taking a pause from what he's working on does not mean he's trying to not listen to me and be bad and get up and be a wiggly worm. It's just, for a lot of puppies, being stationary may seem like the dumbest idea ever. So we're trying to build up that, okay, this is a little challenging, but let's make sure it's attainable. And if it's not, how can I fix my end to help the learner do better? So because remember, as me being the teacher, I want to make sure that my lesson plan is going to help the puppy learn, but also make those behaviors resilient and reliable for down the road. So if let's say he wiggles, I'm going to see if I can lower him into that down. He's like, lady, I wiggled a little too much. There we go. So before he goes to break from the bed a little too early, I'm going to go ahead and maybe have him do another little pause here. And then I'm going to help him get up and take a break from the stay. So I'm going to go back and feed the puppy. Let's say I want to end my stay again. As they become more resilient with the skill, you're not going to feed every so many seconds. It might be minutes to whatever in between. So right here, I'm going to say all done. Give him some little lovies, a little pat if he's interested. And then we're going to wiggle our fingers. He's like, no, I really would want to stay. And then we're going to get him up and break. So for now, he's going to be taking a breather. So now this is where, again, those movement behaviors come into play, because being stationary is a lot for your puppy or even adult dogs. So it all depends on sort of what they've been rocking, for their lesson plans. So for right here, we're getting them up and wiggling. And then we might give Mr. B a little breather, but I want to do a couple more little find its and then see if I can get a couple little check-ins. So Bernie, yes. So gorgeous name recognition. So I'm going to send him away again, and I'm going to call him once more with his name. Bernie, come. And that was, of course, it turned into a recall. But so remember, name does not necessarily mean come when called. It could be, hey, you, and then you ask them for the next thing. Or it could be getting their attention and then redirecting them to something else you'd prefer. But remember, if we use their names heavily and it starts to equal all we do is blab about it, but they don't know what the heck we want, you're more than likely ruining name recognition, which then later would be detrimental if we did need him to think his name had some value. We also want to make sure not to use his name and pair it with something spooky. Like if you're like, so-and-so, knock it off. The problem with that is, again, now their name equals bad. So next time you maybe say their name, they might be like, not too sure if I want to come check in with you. So this is where we want to make sure that if we're ever feeling frustrated, just give yourselves a little breather, give him maybe something else to chew on for a little bit, and just call it a day. So it doesn't always have to be that every single time we practice, does it have to be perfection? You're just looking for progress, but you also want to get it to the point where you can start to read maybe how is your puppy feeling, and then gauge your lesson plan that way too. But Mr. B did such a great job. I'm going to give him a little breather with a few little fines right on his little dog bed, and we'll give him a little break. But he did a really nice job again today.